Ahead and start recording now. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Monica McCoubry and I am the Wildlife Education Specialist for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. I am located here in the Lincoln office and I'm going to let my co-host Grace Gard introduce herself.
Yeah, so hi guys, my name is Grace and I also work with Monica in the Lincoln office, and I focus a little more on aquatic ecology and more stuff kind of to do with water. So
all right, thank you, Grace. She's going to be my moderator today, so if you guys do have questions, please feel free to type them up in the chat, and Grace will get them hopefully either answered, or if she can't answer them, we will answer them kind of throughout the presentation. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to type those in the chat. All right, so today what we're going to do, this is our second episode or installment of our Science of series. So if you have joined us before, great. If you haven't, thank you for joining us. We did one kind of at the beginning when all this started back in July, and then it was really popular, so we decided to keep it going. So this is our second series in an 8-week installment of Science of, and so today we're going to talk about fossorial animals. So if you're not for sure what fossorial animals are, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about that today, kind of underground animals. So in case you were wondering, that's kind of the main theme that we were going to talk about today. So I will go ahead and get my screen shared here. Hopefully nothing embarrassing, but I will get my screen shared and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. All right. And I think I had a little issue last time, but I think you guys are seeing the main viewpoint, right? And not my presenter view. Is that right? Oh, you are. I don't know how to change that. Let's see if I can stop sharing. Let's try this one more time. Okay, so you just see the PowerPoint, right? Okay, perfect. This is why we have moderators, so thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started today. We're going to be talking about the science of fossorial animals. Again, if you have just joined us, we will be recording this. At the very end, we'll kind of show you, if you would like to watch it again, or if you have some friends that were unable to join us today, where you can view this afterwards. So we will go ahead and get started. All right. All right, so when we're talking about animals and we talk about fossorial animals, what does that mean? It's kind of a big word that we don't hear a lot, but basically what we're talking about is that animals that spend a majority of their lives underground. There's a couple different levels when we talk about fossorial. There's something that you might have heard of called subterranean. So another really big sciencey word, but this one means that animals that are subterranean live exclusively underground, so they never ever come up to the surface. This is very few animals, but when we talk about things like bacteria and certain fungi, they only live below the surface and they never need to come up above. So there's very few animals that we're going to talk about today that are exclusively subterranean, because they come up to the surface and they spend part of their lives underground, but not the entire life underground. So we have the subterranean level, and then we have something called fossorial. Fossorial means they spend a majority of their life underground. And then we have something called subfossorial, to make things even more complicated. But subfossorial just means they spend part of their time underground, but they come a lot to the surface. So they only go underground for certain reasons. And we'll talk about what those reasons are here pretty soon. But if you've ever looked underground, or if you've dug a hole and you kind of examine the soil in the ground, you'll notice that it's really diverse. There's lots of microorganisms, there's some vertebrates, there's some fungi that lives down there, there's nematodes, there's centipedes, lots of different really cool things in the soil. So it's a really neat niche, or kind of an individual ecosystem on its own. A lot of the animals that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about mammals, reptiles, invertebrates, things that you might have heard a lot about, but also things that you might not have heard a lot about. All right. All right, so why live underground? If you think about being underground, it's really dark, it's dirty, There's not a lot of sound, there's not a lot of light. So why would animals want to live underground? Well, there's actually a lot of reasons. One of the things is because not a lot of other animals do, and they have lots of resources. They have food, they have shelter, they have water, lots of different things that animals don't get all the time from other niches or other ecosystems that they inhabit. So fossorial animals have the ability then to impact their entire ecosystem. And we'll talk about that today, but a great example are prairie dogs. So prairie dogs get a really bad reputation. People don't like them. They dig up a lot of things. A lot of times people talk about their horses or their cows will walk in their holes and step in their holes and injure themselves. Yes, it can certainly happen, but prairie dogs do a lot more things than we don't see. We actually call prairie dogs what's called a keystone species. So this means that if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have a lot of the other animals that we have today, and they help a lot of other animals, even though we might not see that every single day. So a lot of times when prairie dogs or other animals will dig burrows, they reuse a lot of the burrows that other animals have already made. So they're recycling. They also can pass these burrows down to generations. So even the same prairie dog colony or a badger colony will use different animals' burrows, or they will pass them down to different generations in the family or the colony that they have. Those burrows and tunnels also create air pockets and pathways for water and nutrients to get into the soil, and it's almost like a natural aeration of the soil. It gets, like I said, oxygen in there, nutrients, minerals, so they're digging up the soil and turning it over, and it's a very good thing for lots of other animals and plants. All right, so earlier we talked about some animals that might not live underground their entire life, but why would they want to go underground if they don't have to? Well, there's lots of different reasons. Some animals want to go underground because it's cool. A lot of snakes and a lot of different mammals will go underground because during the hot summer heat, that's one of the easy ways for them to escape and regulate their temperature. If you guys have ever gone down into a cave in the middle of summer, even if it's 100 degrees outside, and you go in a cave, you still might need a sweatshirt. That's usually because the farther you go down, the cooler it gets. So animals, when that heat kind of becomes just too extreme, they go underground. And same thing with moisture. There's usually more moisture underground. It helps them reduce their water loss. Again, if it's really hot on the surface, they'll go underground to keep cool and to regain that moisture back. All right, a couple other reasons is protection. Not a lot of animals like to go underground or can survive underground, so it's an easy way for a ground squirrel or a pocket gopher to run and quickly get underground and get protection. They can protect themselves, their families, even entire colonies. There's also some food shortage and some storage area. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to say storage. So dens and burrows can be used to store food. Mostly those sub-fossorial animals, so ones that don't spend their entire lives underground, will cache or kind of group their food or store their food together when they know that the season's starting to change. So right about now, a lot of those animals are using underground burrows and dens to store a lot of their food that they want to keep for the winter time and eat when there's not a lot of food up on the surface. All right, so just a little adaptations we're going to talk about here, and then we'll get into some animals that are fossorial. So we're going to talk about what adaptations animals have that make living underground very easy for them. So some of their common adaptations is something called a fusiform body shape. So if you've ever looked, a great example of this is like an earthworm. If you've ever looked at an earthworm, they're kind of pointy at both ends. They're really streamlined, they're skinny. This helps them move through the soil and push that soil away easier. If we were to go underground and try to move around the soil, we would not get very far very fast. We have really long limbs. We don't have a pointy head. We can't get through the soil. I don't have claws to dig through like a mole does. So I just wouldn't do very well underground. They also usually have bad eyesight. If you think about it, it's dark and there's not really a lot to see underground. So animals don't necessarily need to have extremely good eyesight to be underground. A lot of animals have almost no eyesight or really bad eyesight because they just simply don't need it if they live under the soil. They also might not have external ears. So they might have ears, but not ones that stick out like humans do. So if you look at your ears stick out. We have external ear openings so that we can hear, obviously. But again, animals that live underground, they just get in the way. They don't need them. And also, a lot of times they don't need to hear a lot. They feel or they smell more than they hear. Also, a lot of animals that live underground, they usually have shorter limbs. Again, if we have these long arms and legs and tails, it's going to be extremely difficult to move those through the soil. So it's a lot easier to have shorter, thicker limbs to be able to dig. A lot of animals will have large, big claws. If you think about a mole, a badger, all those different animals, those are used specifically to move a bunch of soil really quickly and to kind of clear things away as they're digging. And then some animals even have special skeletons that have adapted them to living underground. So they have those shorter forelimbs. They might have thicker bones up in the front of their body, like a mole, so that they can dig faster and have more muscles in that area. They're also more streamlined. So again, shorter limbs, they have more kind of pointy ends instead of like we have big feet and big heads. It just doesn't help us to dig through the soil. All right, Grace, are we doing good with questions or do we have anything?
Yeah, I think we're actually pretty good right now.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to pause there and check. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some different types of fossorial animals that we have in Nebraska. We're going to talk about mammals, and then we'll move on to reptiles, and then we're going to talk about invertebrates. So a good different variety of animals. And clearly there's going to be a lot of other animals that people might mention. They're like, hey, what about blah, blah, blah. Again, it's really hard to cover everything. So I tried to pick some common and maybe uncommon animals that we don't always see or hear about. So hopefully we get a good variety for you guys. All right. So one of my favorite subterranean fossorial animals, whatever you want to call them, are going to be moles. So moles are like the quintessential perfect animal that would live in a fossorial or underground environment. A lot of people think that they are rodents. They are actually not. Rodents are going to be things like pocket gophers and mice. Squirrels are rodents. Moles are actually in a separate category. They kind of look and resemble a rodent, but they are very different. They are actually going to be insectivores. That means that they strictly eat insects. If you've ever looked at a mole, they're kind of that ugly, so ugly, they're cute kind of animal. They have webbed toes, they have extremely strong claws, and their palms actually turn outward. If you hold your hands normally, this is a comfortable position for people, but moles actually have their hands like this. That's because they can clear away a lot of debris and a lot of soil and dirt as they are moving around. They also have these paddle-like arms and limbs. They are ginormous. If you ever look at them, they look almost too big for their body. That just helps them move through the soil. And we talked about them being insectivores. They actually can eat about 70 to 100% of their body weight every single day. They move a lot, they burn a lot of calories, so they need to eat a lot of food. And so what do they eat? They eat things like larvae, ants, earthworms. So not necessarily all insects, since we did say they were insectivores, there are some other animals they eat as well. All right, so normally moles live by themselves. They're kind of solitary animals, but if we took a crosscut of a mole colony or a burrow system, a lot of times burrows and moles, they will actually coincide with each other. So 3 or 4 moles might share the same tunnels underground. That's because there's only so much land every once in a while, and they don't always have to meet up. So they don't have traffic jams or anything like that. These guys are really good diggers. Like I said, they're built for that underground environment. They can dig about 1 foot per minute. So if you think about it, about 12 inches every single minute. That's good for just a tiny little animal. So they prefer shady areas, but they really just want anywhere to dig. Their breeding is in between February and March, and they burrow any time of the year, but peak burrowing times, a lot of times people say that they're kind of pesty, especially around May and June. This is the time that they're actively foraging for food. So moles actually have 2 types of burrows. There are feeder burrows and there are travel burrows. So if you've ever seen them in your yard, actually a great place to find them is Kearney Historical Park. It just happens to be one of the places that I've always seen them. So feeder burrows are going to be the ones that look kind of zigzagged. They don't really have a official pattern that they're following. That's just that mole looking for food. He's just going anywhere he can to find food. Travel burrows are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be long and straight. They're going to kind of follow a pattern. And then moles are also going to make what we call mounds. And that's what actually this picture is. So this is when a mole tunnels under an object and then they push the soil up to the surface. So this is a great picture, and it also kind of looks like there's no straight uniform line. So this is probably a feeder burrow. They were looking for things to eat. And then a lot of people kind of get moles and gophers confused. So if you ever see something in your yard, is it a mole, is it a gopher? Moles are going to have more of a conical or cone shaped mounds, where gophers are going to have a fan shaped. So you can always tell what kind of animal has been burrowing in your yard or in a park or something like that. All right, another one a lot of people don't think about, but armadillos. So armadillos are not actually a native species to Nebraska, but they have kind of moved here and kind of taken up residence due to climate change. So they've actually been found as far north as Ord, Nebraska. So if you go to Grand Island and kind of keep going northwest a little bit, that's where Ord is. They can be found in pretty much any habitat, but again, they prefer shady, sandy soil so that they can dig. These guys live in underground burrows that can be anywhere from 7 feet deep to 20 feet long. And then one armadillo can actually excavate and maintain 10 different burrows within their home range. And their home range is not that large. So these animals are really, really built for digging and being underground. They also have pointy snouts. So we talked earlier about animals that usually have pointy or tapered ends are built for the soil, and they have long sticky tongues. So while they're burrowing and they're traveling, they can just shoot their tongue out and grab animals to eat, kind of like an anteater. These guys have really bad eyesight, so they hunt using their smell. Again, perfect adaptations for being in the soil. They also have strong legs, sharp claws. They sleep around 16 hours a day. I'm not sure that really helps them with their digging, but it's kind of an interesting fact to know. And they also, during cold weather, a lot of armadillos will get together to kind of maintain that body heat. So that's kind of neat too. All right, badgers. So badgers, like another quintessential animal that we think about digging. These guys are related to otters, weasels, wolverines. They actually are omnivorous, so which means they eat plant and animal material. But I would probably lean them more towards being carnivores. They eat a lot more animal matter than they do things like berries or plants or things like that. So there are 3 different types of badgers. I'm sure everyone in the world has heard about the honey badger. Those live in Africa. They actually have European badgers. They look a little different. They just have different markings, and they have a little bit longer of a snout and smaller ears. And then the ones that we have here in Nebraska are called American badgers. So they look very cute, but again, they kind of look like a little bit like that Wolverine kind of feel to them. These guys are really good diggers. They can construct burrows basically to pursue their prey, to find their food, but then also to sleep. If you've ever looked at a badger claws, they have super long claws which they use to dig. All right, so people have even seen, and there's been lots of numerous accounts of badgers digging through concrete. So a lot of times if you go down like a 2-lane county highway, sometimes you might see kind of a dip in the pavement. A lot of times people think that's from badgers. So when badgers will literally dig through concrete, and then a large truck or semi or something will go over it and collapse it in, a lot of people are saying those are badgers, that they're digging through that concrete. So that's how strong of forelimbs and claws they actually do have. When you look at a badger burrow, they can dig about 6.5 feet down, but then have 35 feet of tunnels going everywhere. They use multiple burrows, and sometimes even in the summer, they will dig a burrow every single day. And some of you might have seen this. I won't show you the whole video because it's like 3 minutes long, but I think this should work. It's a video of a badger. Are you seeing the video there, Grace? Maybe?
Not right now.
All right, I think I have to share my new screen here. All right, this should do it.
Yep, you're good.
All right. Again, there might not be sound, but just kind of watch a little bit. So there was this badger in Utah that found this dead cow that had just died for natural reasons, but it actually excavated a burrow, and this was a time-lapse camera over 5 days, and this one badger dug this huge burrow and just sunk the cow in. So this is one of those animals that will cache their food away over time so that they can eat it without other animals scavenging off of it. So it's just kind of a cool time-lapse video to show you this one badger and how he was all over the place. And he buried this huge, like 100, 300-pound cow. So kind of neat. You guys can obviously watch the whole video on your own, but I did want to kind of show you that it is a really neat video just to see that one animal doing all that work. All right, so I will go back to my PowerPoint here. Stop sharing this. All right, so I think you are seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Why am I not? Okay, there we go. All right, so prairie dogs are another ones. We kind of talked about those a little bit earlier. So in Nebraska, we have the black-tailed prairie dog. These guys, when you look at their entrance to their area, they kind of look like mini volcanoes. Is a great way to find them. They're about Grand Island. If you live in Nebraska, if you go about Grand Island and then west, you're going to find prairie dogs. So these guys are obviously very short, and they need short grass prairie areas so that they can see and overlook their areas for predators. So if you go down into the tunnels, they can spread hundreds of acres. Back when there were millions and millions of prairie dogs on the plains, sometimes they would have hundreds of acres underground of their colony. So that's how extensive they were. Some people have even called them little organized cities. That's how intricate they are. They're also very smart. They don't have the same area for everything. They have different rooms and different chambers. So one room will literally be the bathroom area. That's where they eliminate all of their waste. They will have one area for food storage. They will have one area for their nursery. They have one area to escape from predators. And they also help with flood control. So a lot of times they get quick rains out in the sandhills and it would flood their area. So they learned over time to put that mound of dirt at the entrance to kind of displace that water so it doesn't go in their hole, it goes out and around. All right, pocket gophers. So we talked about earlier, moles and gophers, a little bit different. These guys are true fossorial rodents. So they are rodents. If you look at their teeth, they look very much like a beaver, but they have lined cheek pouches of fur. So they have like their name, pocket gophers. So their cheek pouches or their pockets, that's how they transport food underground. If you look at their claws, they are built for life underground. They have big claws. They have big kind of baseball looking mitt hands where they can clear things and clear dirt. They have really sensitive whiskers. They have small eyes and ears, perfect for life underground. These guys are kind of neat too because they're big, oversized teeth. They use those to clear dirt out of the way while they're digging through. So they can actually shut their lips behind their teeth so that dirt doesn't get in their mouth. So it's kind of a cool adaptation that they have. A lot of people see them as pests though. They move a lot of soil each year. So again, it's like that natural aeration. They get more oxygen, more nutrients and minerals into the soil. But a lot of people do see them as pests, especially on things like golf courses and in backyards. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to reptiles. If you do know me, I cannot do a presentation without talking about reptiles. So I'm glad I could figure out a way to put those in as well. Do we have any questions or anything in the chat? Or are we doing good?
Yeah, there were a couple. So one person asked about moles, like where you can find them in Kearney. And I think maybe she thought you had mentioned a place.
Yeah, Kearney. So there's the Kearney recreation area, and then there is the Kearney State Historical Park. I've seen them in both before when we've gone out to expos, and I've seen evidence of like moles everywhere. So pretty much anywhere in that state historical park or that state recreation area.
Great. And then we are also getting a question of who are they related to? And I think they're talking about the pocket gopher.
Pocket gophers, so they're going to be rodents. So they're going to be related to things like beavers, squirrels, mice, anything that's like a rodent. But we did talk about how moles are just a little bit different. Same thing with like moles and shrews. They're way kind of a different category than those rodents. So, all right, hopefully that answers those questions. All right, yeah, if you guys have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. Okay, we're going to move on to reptiles. So a couple of fossorial reptiles that we do have is one is called the Western Slender Glass Lizard. These guys are only found in like 3 counties in Nebraska, so they're not very common, but they're very neat animals. So it looks like a snake, but it is actually just a legless lizard. So there's a couple differences here. Snakes do not have eyelids, they do not have external ear openings, and they do not have a lateral skin fold, which these guys do. So that's kind of how you can tell lizards versus snakes. But these guys are considered fossorial animals, which might be another reason why we don't see them very often. They're underground. They a lot of times will use mammal burrows that have already been excavated to escape those really hot temperatures, especially during the summer. They are found in Nebraska, but again, only in about 3 counties, not very common. And the reason that they get their name glass lizard is because, like other lizards, they can lose their tail if a predator grabs them. And a lot of people, they're very fragile. A lot of people that pick them up, their tail almost breaks off in pieces, kind of how glass would break if you would drop it or something. So that's kind of how they get their name. All right, another one that we have, again, a lot of people don't know, is called the Eastern Glossy snake. These guys are very pretty snakes. They look very shiny. That's how they get their name, Glossy snake. But they are another fossorial snake that we have in Nebraska. They spend a lot of their life below ground. So again, we don't see them very often. And they are true nocturnal snakes. So they will come up after the sun goes down and after it's done being so hot outside, and that's when they will hunt and forage for food. So again, we talked about how animals that are underground are usually have a smaller shaped head. These guys are no different. Their head is extremely small compared to the rest of their body. You can see that in that photo there. And then these guys are found kind of in the western part of Nebraska in the mixed and shortgrass prairies. So again, about Kearney, kind of westward a little bit, maybe even farther west than that, but kind of a rare snake. Again, another rare-ish snake. This one's kind of neat. These are found in the extreme southeast part of Nebraska, so kind of Rouleau, Indian Cave kind of area, southeast Nebraska, but they are a true fossorial snake. I've only ever found one of these guys, and I was so excited when I found him. I flipped over this rock and it was right there. But usually these guys only will come up to the surface after a big rainstorm or after a lot of snow melt. So if we get some snow and then it gets super hot and all that snow will melt, that kind of triggers them to come up from the ground. So these guys prefer those wooded hillsides. They a lot of times are found under rock, barks, logs, that kind of thing. These actually they are rear fanged. Don't let that scare you. They're very small snakes. They only get to about 13 inches long, so not very big at all. They do have tiny miniature rear fangs, so in the back of their mouth, that they will produce a very mild venom to subdue their prey, which is like insects, ants, spiders. If for some reason one did bite you, nothing would happen. You wouldn't even probably feel it because they are so small. It just kind of doesn't affect people, their venom. But they do have a really pointy tail, which they can stab their aggressors or their predators that come up to try and eat them. There was an old wives' tale that said that the tail, if it stabs you, it will inject venom. It's obviously not true. The only thing that does is their fangs in their mouth. But again, it's so small that they will not hurt people. All right, and then we have a subfossorial snake, so spends some time underground, but it's called a Western Hognose snake. So these are my favorite snakes. They're very brown, and then they have kind of black belly, but then they have a scale that is actually looks like a upside down shovel that they will use to dig. So these guys are really neat because if you scare them or an animal tries to eat them, they will play dead, just like a possum. They will roll over, they'll open their mouths, and they'll hang their tongues out like they are dead. If an animal still tries to eat them and they still get scared, they will poop everywhere or defecate, and then they will also create like a popping sound from their vent or their cloaca that will hopefully scare predators into not eating them because they are disgusting. So, all right, we will go ahead and move on. This is the last grouping of animals that we're going to talk about today. Again, I probably missed a few that you were thinking, but hopefully we got a good variety for you.
We have a couple questions.
Yeah, do we have a couple questions?
So back to the glass lizard. One of the classrooms is asking what counties in Nebraska you can find the glass lizard.
I knew you were going to ask that, and I should have wrote it down. They're out in western Nebraska. I think it's like Franklin County. Let's see, Franklin County and Johnson County. Yes.
Awesome.
So kind of hard to see, but if you ever get a chance, Dan Fogel's book is a really great resource to find all those animals as well.
Okay, and then someone else asked how big the worm snake gets.
The The worm snake only gets to be about 13 inches long, so just a little over a foot, and that is a fairly good sized one as well.
Okay, and then what they eat and if they are fast or slow.
They're probably pretty slow. The one time that I did find one, they didn't really move. They just kind of stood there. I'm also huge compared to them, so they're probably scared. And then they eat things like insects. They'll eat spiders, ants, really, really small things that are also found underneath rocks and logs where they can be found. Good questions.
Perfect.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to invertebrates. So ants. Ants are another really good fossorial insect. They dig a lot. So if you've ever been walking and you've seen the ant mounds, kind of where the sidewalks meet from each other, those are just the top portion, but then they can be really intricate and really complex underneath. So this is actually a picture that was from a museum, and it was a cross section of an ant mound, but you can see all the little intricate tunnels and systems that are in there. So a lot of people consider these guys pests, but they do aerate the soil. They allow water to come through. They turn it over and get oxygen and minerals different places. And they're also really good at seed dispersal. So that's how we get a lot of different plants and pollination as well. So on the surface, they look like tiny mounds like we talked about, but they're very intricate. There's a lot of ants in an ant colony, but only about 30% of ants actually dig. So that sounds like, okay, what are the other 70% doing? They're lazy. Well, it's actually very productive. So if we had every single ant digging, they would just bump into each other. There'd be traffic jam all over the place. So they've designated the 30% best diggers to dig, and then the rest of them will remove that dirt and get it out of there, or they'll be taking care of the larva, or they will be bringing in food or eliminating waste. There's lots of different jobs that ants have to do, but only about 30% of them will actually dig. Those are the best diggers. All right, these guys are super neat if you haven't heard of mole crickets. These are, again, a perfect animal for life in the soil. I saw one of these guys about 2-3 years ago. One of our biologists brought one in and asked if we had ever seen one before. And I was like, what is this thing? I thought it was a crayfish at first. It looks like a lobster and a cricket and a mole kind of all got together and just they took parts of different animals. So they have these huge claws. They have a shell on them. They look like a crayfish, but they are called a mole cricket. So these guys have really big shovel-like front legs, which they use for digging. They spend almost their entire life underground. They rarely come up to the surface, and some of them depends on the species, what they eat. Some are herbivores, so they eat like plants and roots, but other omnivorous ones or carnivorous ones, they will eat worms and insects larvae. So a lot of people see these guys as pests, but again, they turn over the soil, they allow nutrients in, but they can disrupt your lawns, or sometimes people that have golf courses, they can disrupt as well. They make similar mounds to that of a mole, so they can be kind of disruptive to some people. All right, earthworms. Sometimes people call them night crawlers. These guys are actually not native to Nebraska. They're brought over from Europe, but they're very common now in the United States and Asia. A lot of people, I'm sure you've used them for fishing before. We sometimes feed them to our animals. My snapping turtle loves to eat earthworms. So they have a lot of good qualities and a lot of good things that people use them for. Again, they're like a perfect animal. They are tapered at both ends. They're streamlined. They have these little rings called annuli that are the different segments on their body. And each of those segments is covered with these little setae or these little bristles. And that is how the earth moves through the soil. So they're actually quite fast. If you've ever watched an earthworm dig, they can actually get away pretty quickly. So sometimes our toads have problems getting them because they're slower than the earthworms. But they are capable of digging about 6.5 feet down. So even though they're tiny, 6.5 feet is huge for a little tiny animal to be digging. So as they burrow, they will consume the soil and they will extract those nutrients. That's how they get their food sources. So they are vital to ecosystems as they transport nutrients, minerals, they aerate the soil, like a lot of those different fossorial animals like we've talked about today. And then our last one is millipedes. So millipedes and centipedes are similar to each other. Millipedes are going to be very different. These guys are mostly herbivorous, so they eat plants. They're detritivores. They break down a lot of things in the soil, so they're very important decomposers for us. Most millipedes have about 50 pairs of legs per body segment, and they eat a lot of things like dead animals. They'll eat dead leaf litter, organic matter, just things like that, and breaking things down in the soil. So it's kind of neat if you've ever watched one dig. If you know what a bucket brigade is, this one person passes here, the next person passes it. So that's kind of what their legs do. When they dig soil, they pass the soil and the debris through all of their legs, and then they push it out the other side. So that's another reason why they have all those legs, is to kind of help them dig through that soil. But again, they're kind of shaped like an earthworm. They're tapered at both ends. They're skinny and they're long, perfect for digging. All right, so that is all that information that I have for you guys. Next week, same time, Thursday, September 17th from 3 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, we will be kind of switching it up. And I heard a lot of people say that they want to talk about plants. So we're going to talk about some what we call dangerous plants. So we're going to talk a lot about things like poison ivy, and we're going to talk about stinging nettles, ragweed, some different plants that you might not even think about could be dangerous, but they are. So kind of some interesting new topics that we're going to cover next week. And then the next 6 weeks, if you are interested, here's the lineup again. We do have a bye week if you've kind of been paying attention, from 8 to the 22nd of October. The 15th, we actually have a bye week where there was no Science of series that week. But our last one, October 29th, my co-host today, Grace Gard, we're going to be joining together. We're going to be talking about Nebraska fish. So please join us for that one, as it's going to be kind of fun to have someone else help me with these. All right, so next week again, we'll talk about dangerous plants, 3 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. I will not unmute you guys, but if you do have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. I think Grace has been doing an awesome job, so please give a hand to Grace for helping me moderate today. She's been awesome. Thank you. Are there any questions that you guys have?
There was one that came in while you were still talking before, and it is, why are earthworms called night crawlers?
So a lot of people call them night crawlers because a lot of times they will come out at night, especially after a rainstorm or the soil has been really saturated. It kind of triggers them to come out. But there's a lot of different names for them. But I think that's the reason, is because they usually come out at night and they kind of crawl. All right. Someone asked, are house centipedes also considered fossorial? Oh my gosh, house centipedes. There's not a lot of things that make me kind of shiver, but that's one of them. If you're familiar what house centipedes are, they're very neat. They live, a lot of times you might see them in your basement. They're not true fossorial animals. They spend quite a bit of time above the soil, but they could be labeled as that sub-fossorial group. So spend part of their time in underground and part of their time above ground. So what else do I see here? How do you sign up for future webinars? Oh, good question. So there's a couple different ways that you guys can do this. One of them is if you go to the Nebraska Game and Parks Facebook page and then click on events. Each event has its own registration. So just click on the event that you would like to register for, and then the directions will be in there to do it. You just click the link, put your first name, last name, and I think your email, and then you will get a confirmation email saying that you are registered. Or what you can do is you can go to the Nebraska Game and Parks online calendar and then find the day or the webinar that you want to register for and do the same process. I think it's under like the contact info or contact website or something, and then it will take you to the link to register. So there's a couple different ways to do it. Probably the Facebook is just the easiest way because there's less steps, but otherwise either way can work. So. All right, thank you everyone for joining us.
There was another question, sorry.
Yeah.
That just sent to me, and they want to know the difference between a centipede and which I think they mean centipede, and millipede.
All right, so centipedes, when we talk about that, it's usually the amount of legs per segment that they have. Centipedes are also a little bit more carnivorous. So they eat more dead animals, or they will actively hunt for animals like insects, kind of things like that. Millipedes are a little bit more chill, and they eat things like organic matter and dead leaf litter, that kind of stuff. So it just is all about the amount of legs that they have per body segment. Millipedes are going to have more, usually 1,000, but that's obviously not true. But that's kind of how they get their name. And then Senta, that 100 per segment. So they're a little bit more carnivorous. They fill a different niche than millipedes do, but they do sometimes look similar to each other. So good questions.
And then there was just the one other one. I wasn't sure if you answered it, and I'm really sorry if you did, but are house centipedes also considered fossorial?
Yeah, so that one, I would probably say that they are sub-fossorial just because they don't spend their entire life underground. But a lot of times people will see them out on like their houses or even in their basements sometimes. Don't get freaked out. They're there eating other pesky animals, but I get it. Sometimes it kind of freaks me out too. So yeah.
Yep.
All right, good questions, everyone. Well, if you guys have any more questions, I'll stay around for maybe a couple more minutes. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. We will see you next week, Thursday, 3 o'clock. These will be available for you guys to view afterwards, probably starting tomorrow afternoon. I will get them up online, and then you guys can share them, or if someone missed today and they'd really like to see this, you can certainly share that link with them as well. So it'll just be our Game and Parks online education page. So if you are interested, you can certainly watch the other ones on there as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope to see you next week. Thank you, guys. All right. We'll get out of this and stop sharing the screen. All right. I think I don't have any more questions, Grace, so I think we're good.